I worked security at a dead mall for 11 nights. The mall had been closed to the public for 2 years. No stores were open. No shoppers, no employees, no music, no fountains, no food court noise, no children running across the tile floors. Just empty corridors, locked storefronts, and the kind of silence that only exists in places that were designed to never be silent. My job was to sit in the security office, patrol the building every 2 hours, and write my observations in a visitor log. That was it. Walk the halls, check the doors, write it down. Simple enough that I stopped thinking about it by the third night. The problem was the visitor log. The log kept updating by itself. Names appeared on lines I hadn't written on, in handwriting that wasn't mine, signed in at times when no one had entered the building. Some entries were dated months ago. Some were dated the following day. Some listed people checking into stores that had been shuttered since before I started. And on the 6th night, I turned to the current page and found my own name already there, written in my handwriting, at the exact time I was about to sign in, with a note beside it that I had not written and would not have written, because the note said, "Visitor, not checked out." I was security. I was not a visitor. I had checked in at the start of every shift and checked out at the end. I had never failed to sign out. But the log said otherwise, and I had already learned by that point that when the visitor log said something, the mall agreed with it. The building did not care what I remembered. It cared what was written down. I kept working because I needed the money. That's the answer to the question you're about to ask. And I know you're about to ask it because everyone does. Why didn't you leave? Because leaving costs more than staying. That's the math. That's always the math. And by the time the math changed, by the time the cost of staying became something I couldn't calculate in dollars, I was already in the log, and the log was not finished with me. Let me start at the beginning, because the beginning is where the decisions were still mine. I found the job listing on a Wednesday, pinned to the community board at a laundromat on Greenfield Avenue. Not online, not through an agency. A physical printout, photocopied, slightly crooked, thumbtacked over a dog-walking flyer. It read, "Overnight to Security. Briar Glenmul, Glenmark Proptosicrasis, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 14 Slaller HR. No experience required. Call for details." There was a phone number at the bottom with tear-off tabs, and 3 of the tabs had already been pulled. I was 39 years old. I had been unemployed for 6 weeks, which was long enough that the panic had settled into something quieter and more constant. Not the sharp adrenaline of losing a job, but the dull, grinding awareness that every day without income was a day closer to a threshold I couldn't come back from. My rent was $1,100 a month. I had just under $500 left in checking. My last job had been a loading position at a distribution center that lost its lease. Before that, overnight stock at a pharmacy chain that automated half its workforce. Before that, a stretch of temp assignments so short and interchangeable that I stopped putting them on my resume because the gaps between them looked worse than a single long gap would have. I called the number. A woman answered. She sounded like she was eating lunch. Glenmark Property. I told her I was calling about the overnight security posting at Briar Glen. "Can you pass a background check?" I said yes. "Do you have your own flashlight?" I said I could get one. "Can you start this weekend?" I said I could. She gave me an address and told me to be there Saturday at 10:30 p.m. and to ask for Dennis Lint. She said he was the property manager and he'd walk me through the site. She said to bring my ID, my social security card, and to wear dark clothes and comfortable shoes because I'd be walking a lot of tile. Then she hung up. The call lasted less than 90 seconds. No interview, no application form, no questions about my qualifications or my work history or whether I had any security training. The job was a warm body in an empty building for 8 hours, and I was a warm body who needed 8 hours of pay. The transaction was that simple. Saturday night I drove to Briar Glen Mall. It was on the east side of the county, off a 4-lane road that used to be a commercial corridor and was now a series of half-occupied strip centers, vacant lots, and businesses that survived on momentum rather than profit. The mall's sign was still standing at the entrance to the parking lot, Briar Glen Mall in backlit plastic letters, most of the bulbs dead, the remaining ones casting a weak yellowish glow that made the sign look like it was running a fever. The parking lot was enormous, designed for holiday shopping crowds, Black Friday rushes, 1,000 cars at a time, and it was completely empty except for a white SUV parked near the main entrance. The asphalt was cracked. Weeds had pushed through the expansion joints. The painted lines were faded to suggestions. The mall itself was a long, low structure. 2 stories, brick and glass, with 4 anchor store wings radiating from a central corridor. The anchor stores had been the first to close and their facades were blank now. The signage removed, the display windows papered over from the inside. The main entrance was a set of glass double doors under a concrete canopy. One of the doors had a handwritten sign taped to it. Glenmark Prophecy Scriffus. Off-force personal only. All visitors must sign in at a Sikik office. Dennis Lint was inside, standing in the main corridor near the entrance, holding a key ring and looking at his phone. He was early 60s, gray hair, a polo shirt with the Glenmark logo embroidered on the chest, the kind of man who had managed enough properties for enough years that nothing about a building surprised him anymore and nothing about his job excited him. He looked up when I pushed through the doors. "You the new overnight?" I said I was. "ID?" I showed him. He glanced at it, didn't write anything down, and handed me a badge. The badge was a clip-on laminate, white, with the Glenmark logo and my last name printed below it. Below my name it said Desicki, night shift. Below that, a barcode. Clip it where it's visible. The county inspector comes by sometimes and they want to see badges. He walked me down the main corridor. The mall was dark. Not completely dark, but reduced to emergency lighting, which meant every 30 feet there was a caged fixture on the ceiling, putting out just enough light to see the floor and the walls and the general shape of the space without revealing any detail. The corridor stretched ahead of us for what looked like a quarter-mile, lined on both sides with storefronts. Every storefront was shuttered. Metal security gates pulled down and locked, or glass doors with paper covering the inside, or plywood panels bolted into the frames. Behind some of the gates I could see empty display cases, bare shelving, disconnected wiring hanging from ceiling mounts. Behind others, I couldn't see anything. The interiors were too dark or too deep, or the gates were too opaque. The floor was tile, large commercial tiles, beige and gray in an alternating pattern, dulled by years of foot traffic that had ended 2 years ago but left its residue. The grout lines were dark with accumulated dirt. Ceiling tiles were water-stained in places. The air smelled like dust and old rubber, and faintly food court grease, a persistent, low-grade smell that 2 years of closure hadn't been enough to remove. As if the fryers and the griddles had soaked their output into the walls and the ventilation ducts and the ceiling tiles, and the smell would be there until the building was demolished. Lint showed me the layout without enthusiasm. Main corridor, running north to south. East wing, which used to be the department store anchor. West wing, which used to house a cinema and a cluster of specialty shops. Food court at the south end, with a central seating area. 6 shuttered vendor stalls and an empty fountain. Second floor accessible by 2 sets of escalators, both dead, locked in position, and a service elevator near the food court that he told me not to use. Escalators are off. Have been since the store's clear out. Don't walk on them. The treads aren't secured, and the county's liability paperwork doesn't cover you if you fall through. He showed me the service corridors, the staff-only hallways behind the storefronts, used by delivery drivers, maintenance crews, and mall employees when the place was operational. They ran parallel to the main corridors, accessible through unmarked doors every 100 feet or so. The service corridors were narrower, rougher concrete floors, exposed pipes, fluorescent fixtures with plastic covers that had yellowed to the color of old teeth. Most of the fluorescents were off. A few were on, buzzing. "You don't need to patrol the service corridors every round," Lint said. "Check the main corridor, check the food court, check the east and west wings, make sure all the exterior doors are locked. If you want to do the service corridors once a night, That's fine, but it's not required. He showed me the security office. It was at the north end of the main corridor, near the main entrance, in what had probably been a small retail space before it was converted. A glass door with East Court to CQ office stenciled on it in vinyl letters that were peeling at the edges. Inside, a desk, a chair, a bank of 6 CCTV monitors mounted on a shelf, a filing cabinet, a radio charger with no radio in it, a space heater, and the visitor log. The CCTV monitors were old, small screens, maybe 9 inches each, showing grainy feeds from cameras positioned around the mall. 2 of the 6 were dead, black screens, no signal. The remaining 4 showed views of the main corridor from different angles: the food court, the east wing entrance, and what appeared to be a service corridor. The images were low resolution and gray-green, the way analog security cameras render low light. Nothing moved on any of them. Cameras are original to the building, Lint said. Most don't work. The 4 that do are on a closed circuit. No recording, just live feed. If you see something, write it in the log. The visitor log was on the desk. A large hardcover book, black, the kind of ruled ledger you can buy at any office supply store. It was thick, maybe 200 pages, and well used. The cover was scuffed. The spine was cracked. A pen was clipped to the front cover with a rubber band. On the cover, someone had written in silver marker, Briar Glynn Mall, Visitor Log, East Court Sickatu. Everyone who enters the building signs in, Lint said. Contractors, inspectors, maintenance, whoever. They sign in when they arrive, they sign out when they leave. You manage the log. If someone shows up and they're not on the approved list. He pointed to a printed sheet taped to the inside of the filing cabinet door. You call me. My number's on the sheet. I opened the log. The entries were organized by date, 1 page per day or sometimes multiple pages for busy days. Each entry had columns: date, time in, name, company, proposed badge, time out. The most recent entries were sparse, 1 or 2 per week, mostly maintenance visits and county inspections. I flipped back through the pages. Older entries were denser. When the mall was in its last months of operation, there were dozens of sign-ins per day. Store managers, delivery drivers, cleaning crews, loss prevention staff, corporate auditors. The names petered out as I moved forward in time, like watching a population decline in a census record. Any questions? Lint said. What am I watching for? Break-ins, vandals, squatters. We've had a few people try to get in through the loading dock. Copper thieves, mostly. If you see anyone inside who shouldn't be, don't engage. Call me, I'll call the sheriff. Has anyone gotten in before? Once, last year. Some kids got in through a service door someone left unlocked. They didn't take anything. They just walked around. Took pictures, I think. He paused. The mall is mostly boring. That's the job. Sit here, walk the building, write it down. Don't overthink it. He left at 11. I watched him walk down the main corridor to the entrance, push through the glass doors, and cross the parking lot to his SUV. I watched on the CCTV monitor until his headlights swept across the lot and disappeared onto the 4-lane road. Then the monitor showed an empty parking lot, and the monitor next to it showed an empty corridor. And the monitor next to that showed an empty food court, and I was alone in a building designed to hold 10,000 people. I signed the visitor log, first entry of my shift. Date, Saturday. 23 name, Mine Company Propose. Glenmark Security, night shift. Bid Jean the number on my laminate. Timeout. Left blank, to be filled in at the end of my shift. The first few hours were uneventful. I sat in the security office. I watched the monitors. I drank water from a bottle I'd brought. At midnight I did my first patrol. Walking the main corridor of an empty mall at midnight is an experience I was not prepared for. And I say that as someone who has worked overnight, in warehouses, stockrooms, and loading docks. Those places are supposed to be empty at night. They're storage spaces. Their purpose is to hold things, not people. A mall is different. A mall is built for presence. Every surface, every angle, every fixture is designed to attract and direct human bodies. To pull them through entrances, funnel them past storefronts, slow them at displays, seat them at food courts, guide them along corridors that are wide enough for crowds but shaped to feel intimate. When you remove the people, the design doesn't go neutral. It goes hungry. The corridors don't feel empty. They feel expectant. The storefronts don't look closed. They look like they're waiting. The food court doesn't look abandoned. It looks like everyone stepped away at the same moment, and the building is holding its breath until they come back. I walked the main corridor with my flashlight. My footsteps echoed on the tile, a flat, repeating sound that multiplied as it bounced off the storefronts and the ceiling and the hard surfaces and came back to me from directions I hadn't sent it. I checked the exterior doors. All locked. I checked the east wing. Shuttered anchor store, empty display windows, silence. I checked the west wing. Cinema entrance with a blank marquee, shuttered ticket booth, old carpet that was so thick with dust I could see my footprints behind me when I turned around. I checked the food court. 6 shuttered stalls with hand-painted signs I could barely read in the emergency lighting. Tables and chairs still arranged in the seating area, as if the last lunch crowd had been raptured mid-meal, and no one had bothered to stack the furniture. The fountain was in the center of the seating area, a 3-tiered concrete structure, dry. The basin littered with dust and a few old coins that nobody had bothered to collect because the wishes they'd paid for hadn't come true. The smell was stronger here. Old grease, old water, the mineral tang of a fountain that had gone stagnant before it was drained. I returned to the security office. I wrote in the log, 0T8. Patrol complete. All exterior doors secured, all wings checked. No activity. No irregularities. I sat at the desk and looked at the monitors and settled into the specific, heavy boredom of an overnight shift where nothing happens and your body knows nothing will happen. And your mind begins to unspool because there is nothing to catch it. I checked my phone. I counted the ceiling tiles in the security office. I read the approved visitor list taped inside the filing cabinet. 6 names, all contractors or county employees, each with a listed purpose and an expected date. None of the expected dates were tonight. At 1:40 a.m., I looked at the visitor log. There was a new entry. I had signed in at 11. I had written my patrol observation at 12:30. Between my patrol entry and the bottom of the page, there was now a new line, filled in completely, in handwriting that was not mine. The handwriting was small, neat, slightly slanted to the right, written in blue ink. My pen was black. Tonight's date. Time in Zo112. Name, R. Vasquez. Company propose. Glenmark Maintenance, HVAC Inspection. Bad, GM0041. Timeout. Blank. Someone had signed into the building at 1:12 a.m. A maintenance worker named R. Vasquez. Here for an HVAC inspection. Badge number GM0041. I had been sitting at the security desk since 12:30. The entrance was 30 feet from the office, and I could see it from where I sat. No one had come through the doors. No one had approached the desk. The visitor log had been closed on the desk in front of me, and I had not seen it open or felt it move. I checked the CCTV monitors. Main corridor, empty. Food court, empty. East wing, empty. Service corridor, empty. I checked the approved visitor list in the filing cabinet. No R. Vasquez. No HVAC inspection scheduled. No GM0041 badge number. I told myself someone had signed in on a previous visit, and I'd missed the entry when I was flipping through the pages. The handwriting looked fresh, but ink doesn't dry at the same rate on every kind of paper, and the log's pages were thick and slightly glossy, and maybe the ink had just taken longer to absorb. The blue ink meant a different pen, which meant a different person, which meant someone had probably signed in during a daytime maintenance visit. And I'd overlooked it because the date was the same and I'd only been looking at my own entries. That explanation made sense. I accepted it. I moved on. At 2 a.m. I did my second patrol. Same route, same flashlight, same echoing footsteps on the tile. Main corridor, clear. East wing, clear. West wing, clear. Food court. I stopped. One of the chairs in the seating area had moved. Not dramatically, not across the room, but a chair that had been pushed in against a table during my midnight patrol was now pulled out about 18 inches, angled slightly, as if someone had pulled it back to sit down and then stood up and walked away without pushing it back in. I stared at it. I tried to remember if I'd bumped it on my midnight walk. I hadn't gone near the tables. My route through the food court took me along the perimeter, past the vendor stalls, not through the center seating area. I would have had to deliberately walk between the tables to reach that chair, and I hadn't. I pushed the chair back in. I wrote in the log, 02224, patrol complete. All doors secured. One chair displaced in food court seating area. Returned to position, no other irregularities. I sat at the desk. The monitors showed nothing. The building was silent, except for the hum of the space heater and the faint, distant buzz of the emergency lighting, which at that hour of the night sounded less like electricity and more like tinnitus, as if the building itself had a frequency it was broadcasting on a channel just below conscious hearing. At 2:51, I looked at the visitor log again. 2 new entries. The first below the R. Vasquez entry. Date, tonight's date. Time 02:30. Name D. Kaplan. Company propose. Glenmark Electrical. Bad GM 027. Timeout blank. The second, directly below. Date 3 weeks ago. Time in 09:15. Name M. Ward. Company purse. County inspection. Civil storage compliance. Bad CS002. Timeout. Not checked out. 2 things about the second entry. First, it was dated 3 weeks ago, not tonight. 3 weeks in the past. A retroactive entry, appearing on tonight's page, as if the log had decided that this visit belonged here regardless of when it had occurred. Second, the name. M. Ward. County inspection. Civil storage compliance. Badge CS002. I didn't recognize the name at the time. I had no reason to. It was just a name in a book. One of hundreds of names that had been written in this log over the years. But the department, civil storage, was not a department I'd seen on any county form, any approved list, any organizational chart. And the status. Not checked out. M. Ward had signed in 3 weeks ago, according to this entry, and had never signed out. I flipped back through the log, looking for an earlier M. Ward entry on the actual date 3 weeks ago. I didn't find one. The pages for that date showed only a single entry, a Glenmark maintenance worker who had come to check the roof drains. No county inspector, no M. Ward, no civil storage. The entry existed only on tonight's page, dated in the past, written in handwriting I didn't recognize, on a line that had been blank 20 minutes ago. I was tired. I want to be clear about that, because tired explains a lot, and I was already using it to explain everything. I had been awake since 7 a.m. the previous morning. I had driven 40 minutes to get to the mall. I was working alone in a building with no natural light, no conversation, and no stimulus beyond CCTV static and the hum of a space heater. Tired people see things. Tired people miss things. Tired people read a line in a logbook and convince themselves it was there all along. Because the alternative is that the logbook is writing itself. And that alternative is not compatible with finishing the shift and getting paid and going home and sleeping and coming back tomorrow. So I did what tired people do. I noted it and moved on. At 4 a.m. I did my third patrol. The main corridor was the same. The east wing was the same. The west wing was different. As I walked past the cinema entrance, I heard sound. Not from outside the building. From inside the west wing, deeper in, past the shuttered ticket booth, somewhere in the corridor that led to the Ulce Spelty shops. It was faint, rhythmic, tonal. It took me about 4 seconds to identify it because it was so out of context that my brain rejected the first identification and tried 2 others before accepting it. Mall music, a soft, mid-tempo instrumental, the kind of generic, pleasant, utterly forgettable melody that plays on loop in the background of every shopping center in the country. Smooth synthesizer, light percussion, a bass line designed to encourage walking speed. It was playing from somewhere in the West Wing corridor, through speakers that I had assumed were disconnected, at a volume so low that I could only hear it when I stopped breathing and held still. I stood at the cinema entrance and listened. The music played for approximately 30 seconds. Then it stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The way sound stops when a source is switched off. One moment it was there, and the next it was replaced by the dense, cotton-thick silence of the empty building. I walked into the West Wing corridor. Flashlight up, beam sweeping the storefronts. Shuttered, shuttered, shuttered. Plywood, shuttered. Each storefront was dark behind its gate. Each gate was locked. The corridor was empty. The carpet was thick with dust, and I could see only one set of footprints in the dust. My own, from the midnight and 2 a.m. patrols. No other tracks. No other marks. Whatever had played the music had not walked through this hallway to do it. I looked at the storefronts more carefully. Most had their signage removed. Empty brackets, faded paint shadows where letters used to be. But one, about halfway down the corridor on the left side, still had its sign. A backlit panel above the security gate, dark but legible in the flashlight beam. Civic Continuity Records Office, Suite Bu 11, not a store. An office, government sounding. I had never heard of a Civic Continuity Records office. It wasn't on the mall directory board. It wasn't on the approved visitor list. I didn't know if it had been a real tenant or a leftover sign from some government service that had operated out of mall retail space, the way DMV offices and military recruitment centers sometimes do. The security gate was down and locked. Through the gate's mesh, I could see the interior. It was not empty. There was a desk, a filing cabinet, a shelf with binders, and a phone. Not the stripped-bare vacancy of the other storefronts. Furniture. Set up. As if whoever had worked there had locked the gate at the end of a business day and planned to come back in the morning and never did. I did not try to open the gate. I wrote the suite number and the name on my hand with my pen because I didn't have the log with me and I didn't want to forget it. I finished the patrol. I returned to the security office. I opened the visitor log to write my observation. The log had written it for me. On the current page, below the entries for R. Vasquez, D. Kaplan, and M. Ward, there was a new line. My handwriting. My pen, black ink. 0412. Patrol 3 complete. Sound detected in West Wing corridor. B level. Identified as ambient mall music. Source unknown. Speakers believed disconnected. Duration approx. 30 seconds. Suite W11. Civic Continuity Records Office. Found occupied with furniture. Gate locked. Interior not accessed. Note, suite not on directory. Recommend follow-up with property management. I read it twice, 3 times. I looked at the pen in my hand. The same pen, black ink, the pen I'd been carrying all night. The handwriting was exact. Not a close imitation. Exact. The same letter forms, the same spacing, the same slightly cramped style I develop when I'm writing in a structured format with narrow columns. Every detail was correct, including details I hadn't decided on yet. I hadn't committed to the word ambient. I hadn't planned to write recommend follow-up with property management. Those were the words I might have used, would have arrived at if I'd sat down to compose the entry myself. But they were already there. The log had drafted my observation before I had a chance to draft it myself, using language I would have chosen in a handwriting I couldn't distinguish from my own. I put the pen down. I did not write a corrective entry. I did not cross out the existing one. I sat at the desk and I looked at the entry and I felt the specific kind of vertigo that comes not from height but from the loss of sequence. The feeling that cause and effect have uncoupled and you are living in a timeline where the record precedes the event, where the entry creates the observation rather than documenting it. The monitors hummed. The building was silent. The space heater ticked. My coffee was cold. At 4:30, I made a decision. I opened the filing cabinet, not the visitor list, the other drawers, the ones I hadn't been told to look in. The drawers were mostly empty. Old property management forms, a stack of blank visitor badges, a box of pens. But in the bottom drawer, under a manila folder labeled Incent Reports, Do Not District, there was a stack of papers. The first document was a shift report from a previous security guard. His name was Victor Hale. The report was dated 9 months ago. The format was the same as mine. Date, time, observations. Hale had worked the overnight shift, same hours, same patrol route. His entries were professional and terse. But the final entry on the report at 6:15 a.m. was different. 06:15. End of shift. Visitor log anomaly. Log contains entries not made by this guard. Multiple sign-ins for individuals not on approved list. Names include R. Vasquez, D. Kaplan, and others. Timestamps do not correspond to observed arrivals. Reported to property manager. Request reassignment or explanation. V. Hale, R. Vasquez, D. Kaplan, the same name. The same names I'd seen tonight, 9 months later, still appearing in the log, still signing in to a building they were not entering. The second document was an inter-office memo from Glenmark Property Services. It was addressed to the site security file, not to any individual. The date was 6 months ago. R.E. Briar Glen Mall. Visitor log irregularities. This memo is to document ongoing irregularities in the visitor log at the East Court Security Office. Multiple night shift guards have reported entries appearing in the log that do not correspond to authorized visits. Names, badge numbers, and timestamps have been observed that are not consistent with approved visitor records. Glenmark has reviewed the log and confirmed that the entries are physically present in the book. However, no corresponding access events, badge swipes, door openings, camera triggers have been recorded for the listed individuals. The log will remain in use per county insurance requirements. Guards are instructed to continue logging their own observations and to disregard entries they did not personally make. Replacement of the log has been approved but not yet executed. This matter has been referred to the County Department of Civic Continuity for review. No further action is required by site personnel. Department of Civic Continuity. The same name as the office in Suite W11. The government department that had, apparently, operated out of a storefront in this mall and was now receiving referrals about a visitor log that wrote itself. The memo didn't explain what civic continuity was. It didn't explain what they would do with the referral. It said no further action is required by site personnel, which is the institutional way of saying stop asking questions. The third document was a photocopy. Poor quality, slightly skewed, as if someone had placed the original on a copier at a bad angle and hit the button in a hurry. It was a page from the visitor log, not the current log, but an older one, based on the page format and the handwriting styles. The entries were from various dates over a period of about 3 months. Someone had highlighted 4 entries in yellow marker. The first highlighted entry, J. Morrow, Glenmark Cleaning Crew, signed in 11:45 p.m., not checked out. The second, T. Azevedo, County Electrical Inspector, signed in 2:10 p.m., not checked out. The third, V. Hale, Glenmark Security, night shift, signed in 11 p.m., not checked out. The fourth, P. Serrano, Glenmark Maintenance, signed in 8 a.m., not checked out. 4 people, all signed in, none checked out. Victor Hale, the guard whose shift report I'd just read, was one of them. He had signed in for a night shift and, according to the log, had never left. Someone had written in pencil at the bottom of the photocopy, in small, hurried letters. These 4 are still in the log, have not been removed. Building confirms occupancy. See Tenant Records W11. Building confirms occupancy. I read that phrase and felt it in my stomach before I understood it in my head. Building confirms occupancy, as if the building had an opinion, as if the building had conducted its own count and determined that these 4 people were still inside. Not that they had forgotten to sign out. Not that the log had a clerical error. That the building itself, through whatever mechanism a building uses to know what it contains, believed these people were still here. I put the documents back in the filing cabinet. I closed the drawer. I looked at the CCTV monitors. The food court camera showed the seating area. The chair I had pushed in at 2 a.m. was pulled out again. Same chair, same angle. 18 inches from the table, turned slightly, as if someone had just stood up. I did not go check. At 5 a.m. I opened the visitor log to write my 5 a.m. entry. I wanted to reassert control over the record. I wanted to write something in my own hand, by my own choice, at a time I selected, with words I composed, and have it be mine. An act of authorship in a book that was authoring itself. I found the current page, below all the previous entries. R. Vasquez, D. Kaplan, M. Ward, my pre-written patrol observation. There were 3 new lines. The first, date, tonight's date, time in, Zo 435, name, V. Hale, company, propose, night security, returning, bad GM 0019, time out, NCA, not checked out. Victor Hale, the previous guard, the one whose shift report was in the filing cabinet, the one whose name was on the highlighted photocopy under not checked out. According to the visitor log, Victor Hale had signed back into the building at 4:35 a.m. tonight, 25 minutes ago, while I was sitting at the desk reading his own incident report. The second entry date, tonight's date, time in 04:35, name J. Morrow, company purpose, cleaning, returning, bad GM 0033, timeout, the third, date, tonight's date, time in 04:35, name T. Azevedo, company purpose, county inspector, returning, bad GCI row 108, timeout, NC, not checked out. 3 of the 4 people from the highlighted photocopy, all signed back in, all at the same time, 4:35, all listed as returning, all with the same status, not checked out, they were back. According to the log, they had never left, and now they were back. Both things were true simultaneously in the logic of the visitor log. They had never checked out, which meant they had been here continuously, and they had just signed in, which meant they had arrived. The log did not see a contradiction. It saw a building that contained people who belonged to it, people who had been signed in and never released, and it was confirming their presence the way a census confirms a population, not by observing them, but by recording them. I looked at the CCTV monitors. Main corridor empty, east wing empty, food court, the chair was pulled out. Service corridor. I looked at the service corridor feed. It showed a long, narrow hallway under flickering fluorescent light. At the far end of the hallway, where the corridor turned a corner and disappeared, there was a shape. Not a clear shape. A suggestion, a darkening of the space at the corner, as if something was standing just beyond the turn, close enough for part of its outline to be visible. It was not moving. The camera was grainy and the light was bad, and the shape could have been a shadow, a pipe, a piece of equipment, a trick of the low resolution. I watched it for a long time. It did not move. It did not resolve into anything identifiable, but it did not go away. At 5:20 a.m. I heard the fountain, not water flowing, water dripping, a slow, irregular drip, the sound of a faucet with a badgy seal coming from the direction of the food court. The fountain had been dry. I had walked past it at midnight, 2 and 4. The basin was empty except for dust and coins. There was no water supply connected. The plumbing had been shut off with the rest of the building's systems. I did not go check the fountain. I sat at the security desk and I stared at the visitor log and I made my mistake. The entry the log had written for me, the 4 a.m. patrol observation, in my handwriting with my words, was the thing that bothered me most. Not the phantom names, not the returning visitors. Those were the log writing about other people. The 4 a.m. entry was the log writing as me. It had used my voice, my style, my hand. It had anticipated not just what I would observe but how I would describe it. That felt like a theft. It felt like the log had reached into my head and taken something. Not a thought, but the specific way I organize thoughts into language, and used it without my permission. I wanted to prove it wrong. I wanted to find one detail in the pre-written entry that didn't match what had actually happened and cross it out and write the correction in my own hand and demonstrate, on the page, that I was the authority and the log was the record and not the other way around. I read the entry again. 0412, Patrol 3 complete. Sound detected in West Wing Corridor, B level. Identified as ambient mall music. Source unknown, speakers believed disconnected. Duration approx. 30 seconds. Suite W11. Civic Continuity Records Office, found occupied with furniture. Gate locked. Interior not accessed. Note: suite not on directory. Recommend follow-up with property management. Every detail was accurate. The time was right. The description was right. The suite number was right. I couldn't find an error, but there was one thing I could change. The entry said interior not accessed. That was true. I had not opened the gate. I had not gone inside. But if I went now, if I walked to suite W11 and found a way to look inside or open the gate, then the entry would be wrong. It would say not accessed, and I would have accessed it, and the record would be inaccurate, and I would have proof that the log could be wrong, and therefore that the log was not infallible, therefore that all the other entries, the phantom visitors, the returning workers, the not checked out statuses, were also potentially wrong. I took the key ring from the desk. Lint had given me a set of master keys, mall-wide access for security patrols. I walked to the West Wing, down the corridor, past the cinema, past the shuttered storefronts, to Suite W11, the Civic Continuity Records office. The sign was dark above the gate. The gate was down. I tried the master key on the gate lock. It fit. It turned. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical sound that echoed down the corridor like a stone dropped into a well. I lifted the gate. It rose on its track with a rattle that made me clench my jaw. Metal on metal, loud in the silence. The sound of a store opening for business in a building where no business had been conducted in 2 years. The gate rose to chest height and stopped. I ducked under it. The interior was as I'd seen through the mesh. A desk, a filing cabinet, a shelf with binders, a phone. But now I was inside, and I could see things the mesh had obscured. The desk had papers on it. A coffee mug, empty, with a brown ring at the bottom. A desk lamp, unplugged. The filing cabinet had a label on the top drawer. Tenant records, active. Tenant records. In a mall that had no tenants, active. I opened the drawer. Inside, hanging files, labeled with tabs. I read the tabs. They were store names, some I recognized from the directory board. Former tenants of Briar Glen Mall. A clothing store, an electronics shop, a jewelry kiosk, a shoe outlet. Each file contained a lease agreement, a tenant information form, and a status sheet. Most status sheets read, tenant, close, lease terminated. But not all of them. Near the back of the drawer, I found a tab that was different. It didn't have a store name. It had a code, BGM Sec NS, and below the code, handwritten, Crank Night Shift. I pulled the file. Inside was a single page, a tenant information form. But the fields were not filled in with a store name or a business registration or a lease term. They were filled in with my information. Name, my name, site assignment. Court secret office, tenant, personal, night shift lease term, indefinite step, sign in, not checked out notes, visitor log confirmation pending. Tenant has accessed Suite W11. Entry 19A applies. See Protocol 4 Aleph, continuity of occupancy. Tenant. The mall had classified me as a tenant, not an employee, not a guard, a tenant. Someone who occupied space in the building. Someone who had a suite assignment and a lease term and a status. And the status was the same as the 4 people on the highlighted photocopy. Sign in, not checked out. The note at the bottom. Tenant has access Suite W11. That was me. Right now, standing in this office, reading this file, because I had come here to prove the visitor log wrong. The log had said interior not accessed. I had accessed it to create a discrepancy. And instead of creating a discrepancy, I had fulfilled a condition. The file knew I would come. It was waiting for me to enter the suite because entering the suite was the act that completed my reclassification from a Sakshiki to tenant. The log's inaccuracy wasn't a mistake. It was a lure. It had written not accessed specifically so that I would access it, specifically so that my act of defiance would function as an act of compliance. I put the file back. I lowered the gate. I locked it. I walked back to the security office. My footsteps sounded wrong in the corridor. Not the echoing, solitary footfall I'd been hearing all night, but something with an extra layer, a half-step delay, as if the corridor had decided to echo me more faithfully than acoustics alone would produce. The visitor log was open on the desk. Below all the previous entries, there was a new line. Not in my handwriting this time. In type, small, precise, printed text that had no business appearing in a handwritten ledger, as if the page had been run through a printer while I was away. Briar Glen Mall, East Court, Sakis, office, tenant records, tonight's date, visit, Vister, my name's, night shift, site, East Court, Sakis, office, visitor log step, sign in, not checked out, badge reclassification, occupant notes. Tenant accessed Suite W11 at IL524, entry 19A fulfilled. Continuity of occupancy confirmed per Protocol 4 Aleph. Tenant record filed with Department of Civic Continuity. Cross-reference, Department of Civil Storage, file MWZ002, Ward Marcus D, North Point Lighthouse, status, concurrent. Cross-reference. Harrow Municipal Records Annex. File MW0001. Ward Marcus D. Status. Archived. MW0002. Marcus Ward. The county inspector who had signed in 3 weeks ago. M. Ward, Civil Storage Compliance, Badge CS0002, was Marcus Ward. The same person referenced in the cross-reference line. Someone from the Department of Civil Storage had visited this mall, signed the visitor log, and never checked out. And now the mall's system was cross-referencing my file with his. Not because we were the same person. Because we were in the same system. The same network of abandoned buildings and autonomous records and departments that didn't exist, and visitor logs that decided who belonged and who didn't. At 6:30, the light changed. I could see it through the security office door. A faint gray shift in the quality of the darkness in the main corridor. The emergency lights losing their dominance as dawn light began filtering through the skylights high above the corridor. Morning. I looked at the CCTV monitors one more time. The main corridor camera showed the corridor. Empty. The food court camera showed the seating area. The chair was pushed in. The fountain basin had water in it. Not much, just a shallow pool, maybe an inch deep, catching the first gray light from the skylights. The East Wing camera showed the East Wing entrance. Empty. The service corridor camera showed the hallway. The shape at the far end was gone. I looked at the visitor log, the last page, the one with all the entries from tonight, the phantom names and the returning workers and the pre-written patrol notes and the printed tenant reclassification, had turned. The next page was visible. It contained a single entry, handwritten, my handwriting. Date, tomorrow's date, time in, 23. Name my tame, purpose, tenant, night occupancy. Badge my badge number, reclassit occupant. Timeout. The timeout field was not blank. It was not marked NCA. It contained a single dash. The kind of mark you'd make in a field where the answer is not applicable because the question doesn't apply. No checkout time because there is no checkout. No departure because there is no departure. The tenant occupies the suite. The visitor remains in the building. The record is ongoing. I closed the log. I stood up. I walked to the main entrance. I pushed through the glass doors. The morning air hit me. Cool, slightly damp, carrying the smell of asphalt and exhaust from the 4-lane road. The parking lot was empty except for my car. The sky was gray and getting lighter. I was outside. I was in the parking lot. I was walking to my car. I got in. I started the engine. I pulled out of the lot and onto the road, and I drove home. I should tell you that I felt relief. I should tell you that being outside the building, in my car, on a public road, in the daylight, felt like escape. That the weight lifted. That the visitor log and the phantom names and the tenant file and the pre-written entries all fell away as I put distance between myself and Briar Glen Mall. But when I got home and emptied my pockets onto my kitchen table, my badge was different. The laminate card that Lint had given me, the one that said Tsikiki, night shift below my name, now said something else. The text had changed. Not a new card. The same card, the same laminate, the same clip, the same scuff mark on the upper left corner from where I'd bumped it against the desk. But the text below my name no longer read Tsikiki, night shift. It read, Tenant, East Court, not checked out. I put the badge on the table next to the transfer letter from Harrow, next to the W-4 from the Department of Civil Storage, next to the pallet tag from the warehouse and the torn register page from North Point and every other piece of paper that a system I didn't understand had generated with my name on it. I looked at the collection and I saw something I hadn't seen before, not a series of unrelated incidents at unrelated buildings, but a file, my file, accumulating, one document at a time, one building at a time, one reclassification at a time. The warehouse had counted me as stock. Harrow had filed me as a record. North Point had registered me as a keeper. And now Briar Glen had claimed me as a tenant. Each building took something different. Each building used a different system. Inventory, records, register, visitor log. But the result was the same. I was signed in and not checked out. I was in the system and the system did not release what it processed. It just transferred it. Building to building, file to file, status to status. An endless reclassification with no final category and no exit field and no line in any log anywhere that said timeout, complete. I did not go back to Briar Glen Mall the next night, or the night after. I stopped answering the phone when numbers I didn't recognize called. I stopped checking my bank account after a second deposit appeared. $487 from Scythe 4G's OPS with the memo line Ward, Briar Glen, tenant compensation. But yesterday morning, I found something in my mailbox. A printed envelope, county postmark, no return name. Inside, a single sheet. A visitor log page, a photocopy, like the one from the filing cabinet, slightly crooked, slightly dark at the edges. It showed a single entry, date, a date 5 days from now. Time, 23. Name my name. Company, Propose, Department of Civic Continuity Staff, Badge DCC 0001. Timeout. Below the entry, in small printed text, Site Not Listed Department, Civic Continuity, Full Integration, Procol 4 Aleph. Sign in note, all prior assignments, Mercer. Distribution Annex, Harrow Municipal Records Annex, North Point Lighthouse, Briar Glen Mall, archived. Tenant Record Consolidated, Visitor Record Consolidated, Keeper Record Consolidated, Inventory Record Consolidated. Final status, permanent staff not checked. 5 days from now, no site listed, no building name, no address, just a department and a status and a date and my name in a handwriting I can no longer tell from my own. I don't know where I'm supposed to report. I don't know if there is a physical building, or if the department itself is the building, or if I've been inside it since the first night I swiped my badge at the warehouse time clock and heard that flat, single beep. I don't know what permanent staff means in a department that doesn't exist. I don't know what full integration means in a system that has already taken my name, my badge, my handwriting, my shift schedule, and my status, and distributed them across 4 buildings in 4 different formats and never once given any of it back. I know this. Every building was supposed to be empty. Every building was supposed to be closed, decommissioned, shuttered, mothballed, dead. And every building was still running, still counting, still filing, still signing people in. The visitor log at Briar Glen Mall is on a desk in an empty security office in a dead mall on the east side of the county. The log is open. My name is on the page. The timeout field has a dash where a time should be. I am at home. I am in my apartment. I am sitting at my kitchen table with every document the system has ever given me spread out in front of me. And the badge on top of the pile says, Tenant, not checked out. And 5 days from now, I am supposed to be somewhere I've never been for a job I never applied for, in a department that doesn't answer its phone. Something is still wrong. Something has been wrong since the first night. And the worst part, the part I think about when I'm lying in bed at 3 a.m., and the apartment is quiet, and the only sound is the refrigerator compressor cycling on and off. The worst part is that I'm not sure the something that's wrong is the system. I'm starting to think the something that's wrong is that I keep showing up, and I don't know how to stop.